Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 2 tight end rankings going into the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about my top 12 tight ends. But again, all of you guys have your stud tight ends on roster. But for those of you who are sitting on the fringe, sitting on the fence as to who you should be playing in terms of that lower end tight end one, we'll give you some options. We'll give you a couple of names that you could potentially be starting this week based on matchups, who we'll be talking about. Again, of course, we always talk about strength of schedule and matchups, so we'll talk about that, the tight end position, going into week 2. Now, before we begin, I want to thank all of you for the incredible support. Again, we just recently surpassed 24,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough for the incredible support. We're going to be creating fantasy football content here for the entirety of the season, trying to get to 7 days a week of content. So again, make sure you click that subscribe button, join the community. For those of you who are looking to find extra content outside of the channel, you can find that down in the description at patreon.com/Andrew Kirchhoff. You can find extra rankings, flex rankings, which I answer only to Patreon users, community Discord, all those kind of stuff, private live streams. You can check that out for those of you who are interested. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's talk about tight ends going into week 2, specifically beginning with the matchup. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up the graphic on screen. This is how many points defenses gave up to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. Of course, we only have week 1 as a sample thus far in 2020. So the Washington football team, as of right now, are giving up the most points because, again, Dallas Goedert with that 20-point bomb that he put up in week 1, on top of Zach Ertz with his receiving touchdown, only 3 receptions for 18 yards. But again, he's going to improve over time. The Washington football team definitely did struggle against the tight end position. I don't know if the Cardinals are going to be able to take advantage of it. A lot of people have been touting Dan Arnold this offseason. Maybe he could show up this week. Well, we'll see. Regardless, as of right now, the Cleveland Browns are another one of these teams struggling heavily. But again, there's not really a Cincinnati Bengals tight end that we want to keep an eye on. The Denver Broncos, they gave up some points to the opposing tight end position. Eric Ebron coming into town could potentially get that job done. The Tennessee Titans, is the Jaguars tight end going to be able to do anything? Tyler Eifert, again, there's not really much to see here and take into account and say, you know what, definitively we can go ahead and play this tight end in this position, because again, these stats don't really say much. We need more of a sample size, especially from the tight end position, because typically the Arizona Cardinals was the team that we wanted to key in on last year, because they had like 5 performances in a row of giving up 20 plus points to tight end. So until we see a huge sample size of that, we're just going to go ahead and just take this for what it is as of right now. We'll go ahead and check out the more difficult matchups going into week 2. Again, the Minnesota Vikings, Indianapolis Colts did not allow anything to the tight end position last week. And interestingly enough, they play each other this upcoming week. So keep that in mind for those of you who are looking to potentially play a Jack Doyle or a Kyle Rudolph. Again, these teams got some great linebackers in terms of coverage, so keep an eye on that. But outside of that, do with this what you may. I just want to throw these stats up here and kind of give you guys a little bit of perspective going into week 2 in terms of the tight end position. All right, so now that we've covered that, we can go ahead and let's start off our top 12 rankings at the tight end position. Again, a lot of these guys you're automatically starting because they are your studs. And a lot of these guys you could potentially, if you have 2 of them, throw them into the flex spot. That's always an option. But starting off with my number 1 this week, it is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews has been fantastic. I mean, last week, we knew he was going to perform well. I mean, the 5 catches for 58 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns for 20 fantasy points wasn't a surprise, because he was doing that on average every single time he faced against the Cleveland Browns in 2019. So this upcoming week, he plays against the Houston Texans. And like I talked about earlier today with Lamar Jackson, his capabilities and what they're potentially going to put up on the Texans defense, Mark Andrews is going to be hand in hand right there with Lamar Jackson, especially down in the red zone. Last year against the Houston Texans, Mark Andrews had an incredible game, 4 targets, 4 receptions, 75 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. He made it look too easy. And to be honest, this Ravens offense makes it look too easy going forward. So I think Mark Andrews, sure, as my number 1 is an automatic, but he really is starting to eclipse some of these other guys as we go down the line, especially with his work in the red zone and being such a prominent option down in the red zone. I mean, if there wasn't a Tyreek Hill or Sammy Watkins on the Chiefs, Travis Kelce would be having those 2 touchdown games far more often. But again, Mark Andrews succeeds because of what he's surrounded with. Speaking of Travis Kelce is my number 2 as of right now. Again, playing against the Chargers defense is typically a tougher matchup for him. Last week had himself a pretty good game, was very underutilized in the second half because, again, he didn't have to be utilized. They didn't have to throw the ball very much, but from what he was able to accomplish in the first half, 6 targets, 6 receptions, 50 receiving yards, a touchdown, 14 fantasy points and a half PPR scoring format. Typically against the Chargers, it's it's a more difficult matchup because, again, Desmond King, the slot corner, is going to probably play against him. But again, in week 11 of last season, Travis Kelce had a pretty good game against the Los Angeles Chargers, and he could potentially do that again this week. Last season against them, he had 10 targets, 7 receptions for 92 receiving yards and a touchdown. So hopefully we could potentially see something of that extent for Travis Kelce against the Chargers. Typically, he has struggled in the past because they've got some great coverage corners that could play against him, bigger body guys that, again, make it difficult for him to make plays. But hopefully this week, again, as a number 2 automatic start, he should be good. Number 3 is Zach Ertz as of right now. Now, I know Zach Ertz had a little bit of an underwhelming performance in comparison to Dallas Goedert's 9 targets for 101 receiving yards and 8 receptions. That kind of, explosion of a performance. But Zach Ertz is still going to be, the favorite target for Carson Wentz going down the line. And to be honest, playing against the Rams, I'm not too concerned about it. I think if Blake Jarwin had stayed healthy, he actually would have had a good game. I don't think that these Rams really have the personnel, unless they're going to bring Ramsey and put him on Ertz. I doubt that they're going to do that and potentially play him that way. I think Ertz, as of this week, should probably get a little bit more opportunity, more production, and potentially have himself an even better week. I know 9.3 points in a half PPR scoring format isn't horrible because of that touchdown upside, but we're looking for more targets, more receptions, and again, more yards in order to give him a safer floor of production against the Rams this week. So I'm expecting him at number 3 to be another great play. George Kittle sits at 4, and I'm not sure if George Kittle is going to play, to be honest. He's been dealing with that knee injury that he got hit by Budda Baker. It kind of looked like a knee hyperextension. I mean, it just went the wrong direction. So as of right now, he did come back in the second half of that game against the Arizona Cardinals, and he did play for 61 of the 62 snaps, but he didn't catch a ball in the second half. So majority of it was just blocking, and he's a tough guy. He's probably going to try to fight through it. But again, if we don't see a healthy George Kittle, he's probably not going to be as productive because, again, if they're playing against the Jets and the Jets are, running the ball with Kalen Ballage and Frank Gore, you think they're going to find success there, especially with Jamison Crowder potentially missing this week? It's going to be a mess. So I think they don't even have to play George Kittle this week. If that's the case, they still need wide receiver help. They just signed Mohamed Sanu, but Jordan Reed, keep an eye on him. He's a guy that could potentially on Saturday night, if in fact George Kittle is out or declared out, is a decent pickup and play, or potentially just keep him on roster until George Kittle is healthy as a Kittle owner yourself. So you might want to handcuff that when you get the opportunity, if you have roster space available, of course. And you could potentially throw George Kittle in your IR slot and then have an extra bench spot for a guy like Jordan Reed. Moving on to number 5, we have ourselves Jared Cook. And I might be a little too high on Jared Cook, but this is my thought process. With Michael Thomas going down, there's going to be 10 to 12 targets available for wide receiver options on this team. But again, they don't have many wide receiver options. Emmanuel Sanders, maybe Traquan Smith if he wants to show up. But to be honest, I think the biggest trickle down goes to Alvin Kamara and Jared Cook as of right now. So Jared Cook, who had a pretty good week last week, 7 targets, 5 receptions for 80 yards, a 10.5 point fantasy week, has been incredible since week 5 of the 2019 season for this offense, putting up 13 fantasy points per game on average. He's been a great producer for this team, and I think going into this upcoming week with Michael Thomas gone against the Las Vegas Raiders, a revenge game per se for Jared Cook. Again, he was a Raider back in 2018, in which he had a top 5 tight end performance that season with Derek Carr. So I think Jared Cook, the revenge game, the trickle down of targets, the more opportunity he gets, the more production he could potentially have, and potential touchdown upside with his size and speed. Jared Cook looks like a pretty good option to me this week. He's my number 5 tight end. We have ourselves another, speaking of the Raiders, we have ourselves another monster tight end. We have Darren Waller as of right now. Here's the thing about Darren Waller. When I think of Darren Waller and I think his opportunity, he needs to be able to get 7-8 targets a game. And that in itself needs to also be a lot of plays to give him opportunity to make yards after the catch. And that's what they did last week. But the issue was that the game script really didn't have to focus on Darren Waller. Last week, majority of his work came in the first half. Again, last week he had 7 targets. 6 of those came in the first half. And majority of his production in the first half because, again, they were running a lot of tight end screens, a lot of plays to get him off in the open field with blockers ahead of him, be able to allow him to make plays. Because, again, he was a former wide receiver. He can make plays after the catch. So going forward, I think Darren Waller is going to be utilized more against the New Orleans Saints if their offense is not able to run the ball as effectively as they did against Carolina, which I'm assuming is not going to be the case because the Saints defense is very stout up front in terms of stopping the run. I think Darren Waller's usage is going to go up. Another one of these tight ends that had a pretty decent week 1. Again, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 45 receiving yards. That in itself are pretty good numbers, and hopefully can continue to produce for this offense going forward, and potentially will be asked to do so this week because of the matchup. Moving on to our number 7, we have ourselves Hunter Henry, and it really kind of showed that Mike Williams and Hunter Henry were guys that got a lot more targets than I really anticipated them to get in week 1 from Tyrod Taylor. Again, Hunter Henry had himself 8 total targets in week 1, which is a great number. Again, 5 receptions for 73 yards. This upcoming week takes on the Kansas City Chiefs, and what he's done in the past, especially last season against the Kansas City Chiefs, is pretty notable. In the first game that they played against them, he had 6 receptions for 69 yards. In the second game, 5 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown. If the opportunity is going to continue to be there, and Tyrod Taylor is going to continue to target Hunter Henry instead of checking it down to a Austin Eckler or finding Keenan Allen in the passing game as much, I think it's just going to continue to bring more value towards Henry, especially once they get down in the red zone as a receiving threat that could potentially have the upside of a touchdown. He is my number 7 on the week. Moving on to number 8, we have ourselves Tyler Higbee. Now, Tyler Higbee had himself an underwhelming performance in week 1. 4 targets, 3 receptions. That in itself, not a great performance, especially considering what we were used to seeing from Tyler Higbee from weeks 3 through 17 of last season, which he was targeted 10 plus times a game. Had himself some incredible performances. Was averaging like 17 fantasy points per game, in a half PPR scoring format. So a little bit of a drop in overall opportunity and or production last week. Now, when you go against the Philadelphia Eagles this upcoming week, there's a couple things we have to remember. Gerald Everett, the second string tight end, who was used a little bit last week, which kind of dropped a little bit of Tyler Higbee's opportunity potentially, is dealing with a back injury. That back injury could potentially have him miss some time. And if that's the case, we get back to Tyler Higbee having a full opportunity in this backfield and really just being allowed to let loose and dominate. But again, I think a lot of the Rams' inefficiencies offensively was, or at least in the passing game for Kupp and Higbee, had to do with the fact that they ran the ball over 30 times. And if they're going to continue to do that, then sure, Higbee's going to get a little bit of a drop in production. But you cannot run the ball 30 times on the Philadelphia Eagles and find success. I mean, look at what Peyton Barber did. 17 attempts for 29 yards. It's just not going to cut it. And I don't think, Malcolm Brown and or Cam Akers, unless they have touchdowns, are going to be incredible upside plays. Again, they could get work in the passing game, but I think this is going to be a heavy passing game, and I think Tyler Higbee's definitely going to be involved. He's my number 8. Our next option for today is number 9, TJ Hockenson. And I talked about him last week as being an option that could come in, play against the Chicago Bears, and have himself a good week because Kenny Galladay's absence. And as it currently stands, Kenny Galladay's missed Wednesdays and Thursdays practice of this week. So what does that mean? TJ Hockenson has more and more opportunity going against the Packers this week. Last week against Chicago Bears, he put up 5 receptions on 5 targets, 56 receiving yards and a touchdown. Had himself a red zone touchdown. Again, that's what you need from the tight end position in the National Football League, especially to become a top 12 guy. So as of right now, with TJ Hockenson's opportunity, the fact that they're going to be playing against the Packers, who are going to score a lot of points early, it's going to force Matthew Stafford in this offense to have to come out and pass the ball themselves. Hopefully, we're going to see more and more opportunity for TJ Hockenson as the week goes on. But I think this upcoming week, in a potential shootout in which they're always trying to score because they're going to be down the whole game, Hockenson can be a great play. My number 10 is Dallas Goedert. And again, we bring up our second Eagles tight end of this episode. But again, the fact that he caught the ball 8 times on 9 targets for 101 yards and a touchdown is incredible. Now, again, if Ertz is on the field, and he typically will be on the field if in fact Goedert is, because they love to run 2 tight end sets. They run it more than anybody in the National Football League, especially in terms of guys that can both block and catch the ball. If Ertz is going to be on the field, Ertz is probably going to pull the majority of the tougher coverage in terms of the tight end position. Now, Goddard's going to be able to run free. They will let Goedert do whatever he wants as long as they lock down Ertz. But I still think that what Goedert did last week is probably the best performance he'll have all year. 101 receiving yards and a touchdown on top of 8 receptions. That is an incredible number that you probably can't match. So I think that's probably his peak this upcoming season, unless something happens to Ertz, of course. But let's hope that's not the case. I think Dallas Goedert is still a safe play because he's going to get 5-6 targets a game and potentially have the upside of a touchdown. So he sits there at number 10 in a pretty good matchup in my eyes. Number 11 is Noah Fant, another one of these sophomore tight ends that are going to potentially have another breakout week. In week 1 against the Tennessee Titans, had himself a pretty good game. Last year, the Tennessee Titans were giving up on average 1 touchdown a week to opposing tight ends. There's a reason why I wanted to fire up Noah Fant last week. And with Courtland Sutton officially being out, it continued to be more and more of a favorable matchup for him, especially with Pat Shurmur, them wanting to pass the ball as much as they want to the tight end position. So 6 targets, 5 receptions, 81 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Having the number 3 fantasy tight end week last week wasn't really a big surprise in half PPR. Now this week he takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers, who did not allow Evan Engram to do anything last week. 7 targets, 2 receptions, and like 9 yards. So Noah Fant's going to be up against in terms of a dominant defense. But I think, again, if in fact the Steelers come out, they take an early lead, it's going to force Drew Lock to have to pass the ball. Of course, the pass rush is going to get there, but why not throw the ball to your safety blanket in the tight end position, even if Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy are on the field? I continue to see Drew Lock looking for the tight end position as a safety blanket on a shorter route. So hopefully that's going to be continued with Noah Fant this upcoming week as my number 11. The final tight end I wanted to talk about, and I just mentioned, was Evan Engram. Evan Engram did not play well in week 1, but I expect of all the tight ends that have a week 1 flub, he has the biggest opportunity for a bounce back week against the Chicago Bears. Again, he takes on who TJ Hockenson just faced. TJ Hockenson, again, 5 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown. He plays on the Chicago Bears. And to be honest, I think Chicago's defense has a couple gaps in terms of the linebacker position in terms of coverage. So as of right now, I think if in fact Danny Dimes can come in and have himself a pretty good week here in terms of at least giving Evan Engram more and more opportunity. Again, 7 targets is not a joke. That we will take that every single week at the tight end position, but Evan Ingram's a better receiving tight end than to just deserve 7 targets. So I think it was the matchup that was definitely holding him back, but hopefully this week against Chicago can have himself a breakout week. We'll put him at 12 just to be safe in case you have a better option on hand. Thank you everybody for watching. I really do appreciate it. These are my week 2 tight end rankings going into the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, rankings are always subject to change. So for those of you who are looking to find up-to-date rankings, patreon.com/AndrewKirchhoff, or you can show up on Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. PST. We're going to be doing a live stream there, answering questions, helping you guys out before kickoff with Kirchhoff, as we call it. Thank you everybody for watching. Tomorrow, Hidden Gems. Saturday, something new. And Sunday, again, the live stream. Until then, guys, good luck on your games this week, Thursday night. A couple predictions. Let me make a prediction real quick. I think the Cleveland Browns will play a lot better this week. I think they will win the game. I think, they're -6. I think they cover. And I think they have a pretty good game tonight. So I'm going to hope that that's the case. Thank you everybody for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.